All right, let's take a look at innovation diffusion theory, or the theory of innovation diffusion. It's said a couple of ways. This one is much longer. Now, I've tried to compact it down for you, so it's very brief. However, ooh, wow, tons of stuff in here, tons of stuff. Don't blink situation. But I'm very used to that in technology. Most study material for technology is just like boom, 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 right? So anyway, let's take a look at it. 2003. So this happened much later than Tam did. And the idea that he had was, how can we break down what people see in technology and their decision process for accepting it? So it's slightly different. So I'm going to point out to you where Tam fits into this, but this one is much more about, how does technology get accepted across the business, or across the culture, or across the world? So this is the diffusion of innovation, and it's across any kind of situation. So you're going to see some things that, they don't quite fit, or maybe a little confusing, because really you're trying to frame this huge thing and say, these are the main points, right? So in IDT, the process of choosing a technology is known as the innovation decision process. So that's the first thing we're going to look at. How does an individual choose a technology? Great. So in TAM, we looked at and said, okay, well, it's perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. So how useful will it be? How easy will it be? Now, to give you an example, as we get going on this, how does that really fit in? Well, lots of people back in the day, right, started keeping notes on little smart devices, keeping notes on their computer, if you're like me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep notes on that, because I will write it down on little yellow sticky notes, and then they get lost, or I have half of an idea and I don't even know what I meant by that. So it's easier for me to put it into the computer. However, most people didn't start using any kind of note taking on a system until the smartphone came around, and it was so easy to take a note. In other words, you have a technology in place, and that technology is a notepad with a pencil or a pen. That's pretty dang easy to use. The part that's hard is organization of those things, and where did the notes go? And that's why you still today will see so many people, they'll just take notes. They have notebooks and they have notepads, because for them, that's easier than the other way of, okay, let me get on my device. I got a tinier screen than my notebook. I got to go tick, 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 I got to put that in, or maybe I use a handwriting tool and then it has to convert it, or I can't write as well, right? All those things complicate the issue for them. And they're like, I'm not going to do it. For a person like me, right? Computers help me organize my life. So it becomes very important to be able to have the end result of, I can just search for that and find it, and there it is, right? I can classify it and say, this is more important than the next one, right? I can do all that stuff. That's important for me. So we're going to look at the innovation decision process first. How does the person decide, I'm going to use that? All right. So through this process, a person passes from gaining knowledge about the innovation to forming an attitude about the innovation, right? We saw that before. So they're going to gain knowledge about it, and that's going to form an attitude, or they're going to form an attitude about it, right? Sorry, I got all these windows with all these recordings in them. Once an attitude is formed, the individual makes the decision to accept or reject the innovation. So once they've gathered enough information for them, then they say, I'm going to give that a shot, or no, I'm not going to do it. If he or she accepts the innovation, the person implements the innovation and then proceeds to the confirmation stage. In other words, to confirm their decision. Did I make the right decision? So we'll get to that. So the entire process occurs in 5 stages. So this process that just got summarized so quickly actually happens in 5 separate stages. And the first is called the knowledge stage, right? And we know that. But there's different kinds of knowledge. There's different kinds of knowledge. For instance, you may be aware that Linux exists, and you've seen some videos on it and that kind of thing. Awareness knowledge is being aware of the technology, usually happens through mass media outlets, can happen through a friend and so on. But usually when it happens through a friend, it'll be more of a how-to knowledge. And that kind of knowledge is attained regarding how to use it. And those of us in technology or anybody that's tech smart will usually gain the awareness and then start looking at the how-to knowledge before they make any kind of decision, right? Okay, this is what they say it does. Let's see if it does it. I'm going to see how to, right? Now, how-to knowledge is gathered from change agents. Now, what are change agents? Well, they're early adopters of the technology. They play a vital role. They're the people that are the spokesmen, right? You should use Linux. It's awesome. It's open source. It's blah, blah, blah. It's powerful. You can do this and that. Those are change agents. They're the people that they tried it early, they believe in what it is, and they promote it. And then finally, there's principles knowledge, or the underlying concepts of the technology, such as how the internet works. And those people that are really good with tech, not just people in IT, right? They move through this process. And a lot of times they want to get to the principles knowledge, right? They're like, all right, what is this internet thing? I'm reading a magazine article about it. You know, if we go back to the 90s, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to get some free AOL and I'm going to get on the internet. Okay, now I'm gathering how-to knowledge. I'm talking to people probably in AOL, right? Hey, what about this? What about that? Because the internet and the way it exploded, unless you were in a city, there's not a lot of people to talk to about it. So you got in there and started working with it. And then the underlying principles of how is this happening? How is it that I'm on this site in Japan, right? Now, principled knowledge is not necessary for acceptance, right? You don't have to know how to fix your car. You just have to know how to drive it right. You don't have to have the how-to knowledge of fixing. But if they don't have it, it may result in discontinuance. They may just say, not good enough, I'm out. All right, so once we get through the knowledge stage, we hit the persuasion stage. This is where the individual looks for information regarding the technology. They evaluate which sources of information are credible, right? They examine people's attitudes towards it. Now, you can try to get away from this as much as possible, but the truth is that you care about what your peers think. That's the truth. I'm going to give you an excellent example, one that I may mention later. So I don't want to offend anybody. People get their egos wrapped up in technology. Most people use Windows, right? Most people use Windows 10, Windows 11, and we can get into why, and actually I will later, as to why that happens, because it's important to know. It's going to be part of your job. Anyway, in other words, you shouldn't always accept that people are always going to use Windows 10 or 11 or any Windows product at all. There's reasons why they use them. Anyway, so just yesterday this happened. A student downloaded and installed Chrome. Now, the reason I mentioned that you use Windows 10 is because Edge is part of it, right? Now, it's totally understandable for somebody to say, I want to use this browser. I'm used to using this browser, so I'm going to download that on my own computer. But this was an EAC computer. In other words, they're only going to use it for about 20 minutes, maybe 2 hours at the longest. And right. So from my standpoint, pretty much all these browsers do the exact same thing. And I don't care which one I'm really using. The only part of my decision that happens is which one is taking all my information and building a portfolio about me. And that's Chrome by far. And then the only other thing that influences me is how fast does this react within the system, right? And Chrome was always sold as the fastest one out there. And it was when it first came out. But then as you add things to any product, it becomes more bloated. And now Chrome is notorious for just burning through your battery if you're mobile or they're sitting there watching you and using processing power when it shouldn't be, that kind of thing. And so that's like the last on my list. I won't use them unless I have to, because I want my better battery life. And I don't want somebody building a portfolio of who James McBride is, unless they're my friend. So anyway, this person went out of their way to put Chrome on a machine that they'd only be using for a little while. Why? Why does that happen? Well, yes, they use that all the time. They know how to use it. But this is somebody in tech, okay? This is not grandma. And why I say that, not to make fun of grandma, is that people that are not really into tech, any little change really upsets them. And so if you move the file menu, or even the file menu pops up differently and doesn't have the same things on it, it bugs them and bothers them, where tech people don't. If that does for you, this probably is not the field for you, because nothing ever stays the same, right? Well, some things do after time. I say nothing because the longer you've been in it, the more chance something's going to radically shift. Anyway, so yeah, totally get it that I'm used to using this, so I want to use this, but you're a tech person. Why would it bother you just to use some other browser for 20 minutes out of your day? Peer attitudes towards the technology. That's the big reason. That's the big mystery. A person goes out of their way, even though Chrome is not on the machine, and they go out and get Chrome because everybody else uses it, and I want to be in that crowd. I don't want somebody to come over and go, "You don't use Chrome? Aren't you using Chrome?" Right? They want their peer attitudes, the people that are around them, to see them as okay. So when this all happened in class, I actually mentioned that Edge is Chrome, right? So basically got to the point where Microsoft lost everything, right? They moved too slow on everything. And so Chrome became the default that the whole world wants to use, because that's what we are. I mean, when it really comes down to it, and I'm really not trying to be derogatory to society or certain individuals, but we're kind of sheep. Whatever the group is doing is what we're going to do. And it takes somebody a lot of thinking to understand why they're doing something, and then go, well, I'm just doing that because everybody else is doing it. I don't want to do that, right? Teenagers say they hate that, but they're constantly doing that, right? I'm going to dye my hair blue because it shows I'm edgy. Yeah, right. Just like the other 100,000 people that have, or millions of people, not 100,000, that dyed their hair blue so they could be edgy. So you're trying to fit into the edgy peer group, right? That's the way we work. And so Edge is Chrome, because they couldn't get any traction by making their own anymore. So they're like, we'll just go over and grab Chromium, which is an open source project that Chrome is built on and Chrome OS is built on. And we'll just take that over and make Edge out of it. Now, basically, come use our Google Chrome that won't create a profile of you, right? So peer attitudes, persuasion, the second stage, right? They look for sources of information that they feel are credible and evaluate peer attitudes. So I'm going to go and look for people that I think are smart and know, and I'm going to find out what my peers are using. And I'll probably even make that person that's smart and knows part of my peer group, because that's something that you just do internally. So favorable or unfavorable attitude about a technology doesn't always lead to acceptance or rejection, right? So it doesn't always lead to that. It depends on you and how you are evaluating it, right? So that's the hard part. Sometimes an affirmative attitude towards a technology doesn't result in use. And when this happens, it's known as the knowledge attitudes practice gap. Now that's a big word, but it's basically saying they went through knowledge, then they formed their attitude, and then they didn't put it into practice, right? And we're not sure why that has happened. All right, moving on. The decision is the third stage. Person decides to participate in activities that result in acceptance. So you're looking at a phone and maybe you've used iOS forever, right? That's just the first phone you used, and you're like, I really wonder about this Android. There's some pretty cool things you can do with that. So, right. And so you go through the knowledge and you go through persuasion, see what your peers are doing and that kind of thing. And then you finally get to the decision phase. That's when you're like, I'm going to go to a Best Buy and I'm going to use right? I'm going to participate in activities that are going to result in my acceptance or rejection of that innovation. So I'm going to go and use Android and find out if I like it. Or maybe even go farther and you go, I'll just get a really old Android phone and I won't actually use it as a phone for a while. I'll just use it, see if I like it, right? I spent 50 bucks on it and see if I like it, and I'll use it for something else if I don't, right? So active rejection is the person was going to adopt it, but change their mind. So in this scenario, when you're talking about an iPhone and you're talking about Android, then you're talking about an active rejection might be, this is really cool, but would I use it that way, the way I think I'm going to use it? Probably not. So you just actively reject it. Passive rejection, the person never explores what adoption of the technology means. So they play around with it and they're like, whatever, I got other things in my life. And they go on with doing other things. If the individual chooses to accept the technology, the next stage is implementation, right? So yeah, I used that Android phone. I thought that was pretty dang cool. So now my next phone is going to be Android. I'm actually going to cut off what I'm doing with iOS and I'm going to get an Android phone, right? You're accepting that the difficulty in that transition, which if you're like me, that's almost something that you enjoy. I have been known in the past to accept a technology just to mess with it and know how it works. And then later on, like, it's really not more useful than the other one. And so then I go back to whatever else it was, or it just really depends, right? So implementation is actual use. If that was on a test, what is implementation? It's actual use. You're using the technology and the many things that occur at this stage resulting in discontinuance or rejection, right? So you're using this technology, you're going to run into problems, right? There's going to be problems in that shift. So problems and understanding how to fully implement technology might happen. And if you're not going to fully implement it, right, then you don't find it as useful as the old one. So even if you go back to the notepad and pencil idea and using it on a phone instead, you go ahead and put it all into your phone, and then you never use the advantages to doing that, right? Then you just go back and start using a pencil and paper. However, a change agent or one who has accepted the technology and understands it is really helpful in resolving those issues. So if you do end up accepting something like that, and you know that there's a person that's a pro at it, then chances are you're going to go to them and go, I don't know about this, that, or the other, and they'll resolve your concerns and you'll move forward with it. All right, so individuals that find new uses for the technology are called reinventors. So, oh, did you know you can do this on the phone too? Right? So maybe that's not why you got it. I'm not saying that all of a sudden they came out with this fantastic new idea that nobody's thought of. What I'm saying is that you're thinking of these 4 things you're going to do with that, and those are more acceptable or as acceptable as what you were doing before. You've accepted it. Now you go through and you go, you know what else I could do on this thing? You download a different app. Now you're scanning Wi-Fi networks and you're like, there I go. And that's a reinventor. That's basically you have thought of another use that wasn't really your traditional set of uses. So reinventors encourage customization to individual needs and circumstances and are normally change agents, which makes sense. Then finally, this big one, confirmation. Confirmation is the final phase. You see people go through this all the time. At this point, the new adopter looks for support regarding their decision to use the technology. So even if, let's say the person went from iOS to Android, and right, the downside to iOS is lack of customization, lack of some of the things that are on the fringe, maybe kind of illegal to do. So iOS doesn't do that for legal reasons, or they don't do it because it's might crash your phone or that kind of thing. And so you've got iOS, safe, more restrictive, but very stable, very usable, very not hackable, no virus scanning needed, that kind of thing. And then you've got Android, and it's much more open, which means much more chances of viruses or the machine crashing, you installing something that messes it up, just like your Windows or Mac computer. more open like those. And so you've gone to Android. Now you're going to go through the process of finding all these individuals that make you feel better about your decision. That's really what this is. It's support regarding your decision. You're going to find user groups. You're going to find things. You might even get so far that other direction that you're actually going, let me find an Android group that really badmouths iOS all the time. It talks about how crappy it is, right? I've seen those groups and it's like, oh yeah, Apple's made another crap CPU. And it's like, dude, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. It happens a lot more on the Android, so it's easier to say, hey, when you switch over, right? On the iOS side, people aren't so concerned with, oh, Android, oh, they made another crap CPU. You know, that usually is not in their verbiage, but there are people that do that. So if a person receives too much information incongruent, right? So they receive information that says, no, actually, there's all these issues with Android that you need to be concerned with, and they don't like that. Or maybe they're really like me, like I'm concerned about privacy issues in the United States and the world. And I'm like, I'm not going to use Android simply because of that, simply because everything on there, they're just tracking and no. And I'm not going to do that. And, you know, some people say, oh, McBride, you know, whatever, it's out there. Go read about it. It's not hidden. Google doesn't hide it. So they will discontinue it. That's disenchantment discontinuance happens when the innovation does not meet with the standards and ideas the individual has imagined. In other words, I'm going to do this stuff with it, and that's failed to do that for me. And then there's replacement discontinuance, and that happens when a person replaces the technology with a competing innovation that basically supports more of what they really think about or really want. They feel is superior to the previous. So it doesn't mean it is, but that's their feelings. All right, so that's the first portion of this. I'm gonna, stop this video, and then we will go through the attributes of innovation, because that's dealing with the innovation itself, the attributes that that innovation has, not the decision process of the person, right? The decision process is, how do I choose? What affects my choice?